Let's get right into it. Number 7. The savage who fought for freedom. Crazy Horse was called a savage for protecting his home. He wasn't fighting for glory. He was fighting because gold-hungry settlers were flooding into his people's sacred lands. The U.S. government had promised these lands would belong to the Lakota people as long as the grass grows and the river flows. That promise didn't last. In 1874, someone found gold in the Black Hills. Suddenly, those treaties weren't worth the paper they were written on. When the Lakota defended their land, they were labeled as bloodthirsty savages. He never drank alcohol, lived simply, and gave food to the poorest members of his tribe. He never let anyone photograph him because he believed it would steal his spirit. So every picture you've ever seen of Crazy Horse is actually someone else. In 1876, he led a force that demolished Lieutenant Colonel George Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn. His success led to his death. The army couldn't beat him in battle, so they used deception. They convinced him to come in for peace talks. When he arrived, they tried to throw him in a prison cell. During the struggle, a soldier bayoneted him in the back. His last words were, "Let me go, my friends. You have got me hurt enough." Today, there's a massive mountain carving of Crazy Horse being built in the Black Hills. It's bigger than Mount Rushmore. It's being carved into the same sacred mountains he died trying to protect. He never broke a treaty. He never went back on his word. And he never stopped fighting for his people's right to exist. Number 6. The last true samurai. Japan in the 1860s had just opened its borders after 200 years of isolation. They were looking at the rest of the world like someone waking up from a really long nap. Everyone had fancy new weapons, steam engines, and these things called business suits. Saigo helped overthrow the old government to modernize Japan. He was basically one of the founding fathers of modern Japan. But the new government started banning samurai from carrying swords. That's like telling a medieval knight his horse is now illegal. They made everyone cut off their traditional top knots, like the government telling you your man bun is now a federal crime. They replaced samurai warriors with a modern army of conscripts. Meanwhile, the samurai spent their whole lives mastering the art of combat. Saigo watched as centuries of tradition got tossed out like last week's sushi. His fellow samurai, once proud warriors, were reduced to basically being mall cops. Some were so broke, they were selling their ancestral swords to buy food. It was the equivalent of pawning your family's metals to pay rent. So, Saigo started a rebellion. He gathered about 40,000 samurai. But instead of talking it out, the government sent in their new modern army. The final battle happened at a place called Shiroyama. Saigo was down to his last 500 men, facing 30,000 troops with modern weapons. It was like bringing a sword to a gunfight, literally. But these samurai actually managed to hold their own for a while. They were charging into gunfire with swords. In the end, Saigo and his men got surrounded. Rather than surrender, he committed ritual suicide, keeping it old school till the very end. The same government that called him a traitor later pardoned him. They even built him a statue in Tokyo. Today, Japan is one of the most technologically advanced nations in the world, but they've managed to keep their cultural identity intact. They've got bullet trains and traditional tea ceremonies, robots and kabuki theater. Number 5. The villain who showed more mercy than his enemies. You're a Christian soldier in Jerusalem in 1187. Your city just fell to Muslim forces after a brutal siege. You expect slaughter. When Christians took Jerusalem 88 years earlier, they killed almost everyone inside. The streets literally ran red with blood. But instead of slaughter, Saladin offers to let everyone leave safely if they can pay a ransom. If you couldn't afford the ransom, Saladin paid it himself for thousands of poor people. This is the guy European chronicles painted as a bloodthirsty villain. When Richard the Lionheart was sick during battle, Saladin sent him his personal physician and fresh fruit. When Richard's horse was killed in combat, Saladin sent him 2 fresh horses, saying a knight shouldn't fight on foot. Meanwhile, Richard was busy beheading 2,700 Muslim prisoners of war in a single day. Saladin wasn't just being nice, he was being smart. By showing mercy, he made surrendering to him look way better than fighting to the death. Cities started surrendering without a fight. Better to walk away than risk everything. This villain managed to retake almost all the Crusader territories, while keeping civilian casualties surprisingly low. He united Egypt and Syria, kicked out foreign invaders, and did it all while following a strict code of honor that impressed even his enemies. The same European writers who called him a demon eventually started writing stories about his nobility and mercy. By the 1200s, European literature was painting him as the perfect noble warrior. When he died, they found he'd given so much to the poor that he didn't have enough money left for his own funeral. The villain died broke because he couldn't stop helping people. Number 4. History's most famous backstabber. Marcus Junius Brutus, the guy who put 23 holes in Julius Caesar. 2,000 years later, his name is still a synonym for betrayal. But Brutus wasn't just some jealous friend with a knife collection. He was fighting to save democracy. Brutus came from a family of democracy defenders. His ancestor, the first Brutus, had kicked out Rome's last king and created the Republic. But Brutus actually loved Caesar. Caesar was like a father figure to him. He even saved his life once. When civil war broke out between Caesar and Pompey, Brutus fought against Caesar. But when Caesar won, instead of having Brutus killed, he gave him a high-ranking job and treated him like a son. Brutus turned his best friend into a human pincushion because Caesar was becoming a king in all but name. Caesar had just been named dictator for life. He was putting his face on coins, something only gods got to do back then. He was wearing purple robes, the color of kings. He was acting more like a monarch every day. Brutus started getting letters from citizens saying his ancestors would be ashamed. Brutus joined the conspiracy to kill Caesar, not because he hated him, but because he loved Rome more. The other conspirators needed Brutus. They knew having the most honest man in Rome on their side would make the assassination look less like a murder and more like a public service. After they killed Caesar, Brutus refused to kill Mark Antony too. He said they weren't murderers, they were surgeons removing a cancer from the Republic. Antony turned the public against the conspirators. Brutus ended up losing everything: his wealth, his reputation, and eventually his life. The Republic he tried to save died anyway. Rome became an empire under Augustus, and democracy wouldn't return for nearly 2,000 years. Number 3. The bandit who fought for the poor. In early 1900s Mexico, a handful of rich families owned literally everything. All the good land, all the water, even the people working for them were basically slaves. The rich landowners, called hacendados, owned 95% of the land. Meanwhile, millions of poor farmers were working themselves to death just to survive. Emiliano Zapata grew up watching these hacendados steal land from poor villages. They'd show up with fake documents, and suddenly your family's farm belonged to them. If you complained, their private security forces would beat you up. Zapata wasn't having any of that. He started organizing farmers to fight back. His slogan was simple: the land belongs to those who work it. The government labeled him a dangerous criminal and sent the army after him. Zapata turned out to be a military genius. His fighters would attack government forces, then disappear into the mountains before anyone could catch them. They'd hide their weapons under their clothes and pretend to be farmers when the army came looking. Then as soon as the army left, the farmers had guns again. It drove the government absolutely crazy. Zapata wasn't fighting for money or power. When his side briefly took control of Mexico City, he refused to sit in the presidential chair. He said, "That chair is contaminated." Instead, he went right back to fighting for land reform. The government eventually got so desperate to stop him that they set up a fake surrender meeting. When Zapata showed up, they gunned him down. Even after they killed him, they couldn't kill his ideas. The land reforms he fought for eventually became law. Today in Mexico, there's this thing called the ejido system. It's basically communal land ownership for farmers. Number 2. John Brown. It's 1859. Slavery is still legal in America. While most abolitionists are writing strongly worded letters and giving passionate speeches, John Brown is loading his rifle. This deeply religious man believed God had personally chosen him to end slavery. He wasn't planning to do it with prayers. Brown's most famous action was the raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia. His plan was simple, but absolutely insane. Storm a federal armory, steal thousands of weapons, and arm slaves for a massive uprising. The raid failed spectacularly. Brown was captured, tried for treason, and hanged. Before his execution, Brown wrote something that gave chills to both his supporters and enemies. "I am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away, but with blood." Less than 2 years later, the Civil War began. Brown was a terrorist. By modern definitions, absolutely. He used violence and fear to achieve political goals. He tried to start an armed uprising. He was fighting against slavery, arguably the most evil institution in American history. Brown lost his battle but helped win the larger war. His actions terrified the South so much that it accelerated the path to civil war. His execution turned him into a martyr for the abolitionist cause. Union soldiers marched into battle singing John Brown's Body, which later became the battle hymn of the Republic. John Brown was both a terrorist and a freedom fighter. That tells us something uncomfortable about the nature of political violence and social change. We'd all prefer change to come peacefully, but history shows us it often doesn't work that way. Number 1. Arminius. The Romans took him from his Germanic tribe when he was just a boy. They trained him, taught him their ways of war, and made him a Roman citizen. He became so trusted they put him in charge of auxiliary units. But while learning Roman tactics, he watched how they treated conquered people. Heavy taxes, forced labor. The Romans weren't known for gentle treatment of rebels. Arminius used everything the Romans taught him against them. In 9 AD, he convinced Roman general Varus to march 3 legions through the Teutoburg forest. That's 20,000 soldiers. Varus trusted Arminius completely. The forest was muddy and narrow, perfect for an ambush. Germanic warriors attacked from all sides. Arminius had secretly organized them. The Romans couldn't form their battle formations. Their heavy armor made them sink deeper into the mud. 3 legions wiped out. The Romans retired the numbers of these legions. Emperor Augustus supposedly banged his head against palace walls, shouting, "Varus, give me back my legions." This battle drew a line in the sand for Roman expansion. The Romans never conquered Germania after this. The Romans wrote Arminius down as a terrible traitor, but he was protecting his homeland from conquest. The Romans showed up uninvited, demanded tribute, and if you refused, they'd enslave your population. If Arminius hadn't stopped Rome's expansion, the map of Europe might look different today. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.